Very good afternoon and evening to all colleagues who join from the different ends of WHO Southeast Asia region. And good morning, headquarters colleagues joining from Geneva. Welcome to the IHR Focal Point webinar titled Are We Prepared for the Next Pandemic? This is 1 hour webinar that describes the preparedness and resilience for emerging threats and opportunities for IHR focal point engagement to strengthen country pandemic preparedness. Uh, First up in the agenda is welcome and setting the scene. Let me call upon Dr. Nilesh Buddha for this welcome remark from SEARO side. Dr. Nilesh is the lead regional emergencies at WHO Southeast Asia Regional Office, and he is also the acting regional emergency director at the moment. Over to you, Dr. Nilesh.
Thank you, Pushpa. Good morning, good afternoon to all the colleagues who have joined, particularly IHR national focal points of the member states of the WHO Southeast Asia region. Dr. Sylvie Briand, the Director of Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness from WHO Geneva, Dr. Gina Saman and other members of the PRET Secretariat, my colleague Dr. Pushpa, Dr. Mong, Dr. Rajan, and other colleagues who have joined online from the WHO SEARO and WHO country offices. Let me extend my warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Regional Emergency Director, Dr. Edwin. Please allow me to spend a couple of minutes to set the scene for this webinar for the region. In line with several WHO World Health Assembly resolutions, WHO is committed to supporting member states with pandemic preparedness planning through the provision of guidance and technical assistance. The Strategic Preparedness, Readiness and Response Plan to end the global COVID-19 emergency in 2022 encouraged member states to consider an integrated approach to respiratory pathogen preparedness planning that fits within their existing national planning processes and budget cycles. Harmonizing pandemic preparedness planning across multiple respiratory pathogens offers member states an opportunity to maximize available resources, increase coordination, and reduce duplication of planning efforts. The preparedness and resilience for emerging threats, which is PRET, you will keep hearing this new acronym very frequently, a very important acronym. I will repeat it. The preparedness and resilience for emerging threats, which is called PRET, initiative is an innovative approach to improving disease pandemic preparedness. It recognizes that the same systems, capacities, knowledge, and tools can be leveraged and applied for groups of pathogens based on their mode of transmission. This is the crux of the matter, that we plan according to the mode of transmission. As the epidemiologists, we all are well aware that if we take that approach, this is most efficient. For example, respiratory mode of transmission, vector-borne mode of transmission, foodborne diseases, etc. PRET incorporates the latest tools and approaches for shared learning and collective action established during the COVID-19 pandemic and other recent public health emergencies. It places the principles of equity, inclusivity, and coherence at the forefront. The integrated approach to respiratory pathogen preparedness planning could be built on existing hazard-specific plans and all hazard plans. As the colleagues in the Southeast Asia region are well aware, that based on the lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic response, we conducted a series of workshops and developed the new regional health security roadmap for next 5 years, starting from this year. And this new roadmap was endorsed by our regional committee last year. This new roadmap incorporates the systems component of the new framework called HEPR, Health Emergency Preparedness, Resilience, Response, etc. The foundation of the regional roadmap to strengthen health security is building regional systems. And as I said, these systems are well addressed in the new HEPR framework, which also now all of us are very well familiar with. Given that there is a high likelihood of the next pandemic is due to a respiratory virus, countries have understood the value of broad respiratory pathogen pandemic planning. The module 1 of the PRET framework, that is respiratory borne transmission mode, will be a useful guidance to the countries. Understanding the value of PRET and its alignment with the regional roadmap on health security, WHO Southeast Asia Regional Office is working with the PRET Secretariat. And when I say PRET Secretariat, is basically our WHO Geneva colleagues to roll out PRET as a guidance for our countries to engage with revising and updating their pandemic plans. A series of activities are planned for this rollout, and Dr. Pushpa is keeping all of us on toes, making the best use of available expertise and support from Geneva. We try to incorporate 1 hour, 2 hours in the ongoing meetings, and then also we are planning exclusive PRET meeting later in the year, and we also look forward to visit of Dr. Sylvie and Dr. Gina in the coming months to take these really forward in the region. All of us during COVID-19 pandemic learned that lot of infrastructure of flu and PIP has been very crucial in responding to pandemic of COVID-19 in a very efficient manner, and we want to further build on that, and that's why we are planning these synergistic activities to take the PRET framework forward in the region. I'm sure that this webinar will be very useful and interactive for the IHR national focal points, because as we know in the JEE and SPAR, the important indicator of national planning for pandemic and health emergencies is an important indicator. And so I hope that all IHR national focal point will find it useful. We look forward to the deliberations, and I sincerely thank my WHO colleagues for all the support. Thank you, and back to Pushpa.
Thank you, Dr. Nilesh, and thank you very much, especially for setting the stage and also highlighting the importance of the launching pad for PRET by highlighting the regional roadmap for health security, which gives us a clear pathway for us to implement PRET in the region. With that in mind, I think we need to move on to the other aspect. There were lots of events that led to emergence of the PRET approach. No one is in a better position than Dr. Sylvie Briand to take us through the global scene setting. We know how things happen behind the curtains, and then how things happen in the big meeting, etc. So let's invite Dr. Briand. Dr. Briand is the Director, Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness at WHO headquarters. Dr. Sylvie, the floor is yours. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pushpa and Dr. Nilesh, for inviting me to give those few words. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone online, and thank you very much for joining. Indeed, PRET for us is a very important approach. It's really based on the experience that we have had from COVID-19. Everybody has learned from COVID-19. So it was a catastrophe for many of us who have lost some relatives. So my condolences to all of you if you have had such a loss in your families or in your relatives. But from the public health perspective and public health professional, we know now that we need to move forward and we need to be better prepared for the next pandemic. And so, as I said, it's very important to learn the lessons from COVID, and PRET is part of it, is having learned what works, what doesn't work during a pandemic response. but also integrating the innovation that we have had during this crisis, because as you know, there are very visible innovations, such as the new vaccine, for example, with the mRNA platform. But there have been many innovations during this crisis. Rapid test, for instance, wastewater surveillance, which is still being evaluated. We have seen also the detrimental effect of social media in some countries. And so we have developed methods and tools to manage the infodemic and so on. So many new things have happened during those 3 years, and it's part of the fourth technological revolution, but we need to see how we can integrate those innovation in our planning for future pandemics. We have seen also during COVID-19 that preparedness matters. And countries who were better prepared, for example, anticipating an influenza pandemic with good influenza preparedness plan, were more eager to also switch these preparedness activities to COVID-19, and were better prepared to when the virus came into the country. So we see that it's very important to have the IHR core capacities, because these are the foundation of preparedness, but it's also very important to complement them with specific capacities related to some pathogens. And that's why respiratory pathogens are quite specific and require also additional capacities and capabilities to be able to deal with a pandemic of respiratory pathogens. To give you just a very concrete example, we have seen some countries with very high score, IHR core capacity scores, but when COVID started, they didn't have a stockpile of masks, for instance. So this is just an example of what means specific preparedness, what are the kind of things we need to add to generate plans so that we are better prepared for the next pandemic. And of course, what we learned during COVID-19 is that we need a national preparedness plan, but we need also to look a little bit at the subnational level, especially in large countries, federal states, where different states may have a different level of preparedness as well. And it's also very important to look at the supranational preparedness, because a pandemic, by definition, affects the entire world. And so there is a strong component of collaboration between countries that is needed. So that's why PRET is an opportunity for all of us, because it will give us the same framework based on the HEPR that was mentioned by Dr. Nilesh previously. It's same framework that will facilitate the collaboration between countries, because when we will talk about collaborative surveillance, we will all know what it means, and we will all be able to work together to make it happen faster. So all of this preparedness effort happen while our member states are negotiating the pandemic accord. And so, of course, this accord will shape the future of all of us. But it's important also not to wait for this accord to be endorsed to start preparedness for the next event, because nobody knows when it will come. And we hope it will come in many years from now, that we are all retired, hopefully, but maybe not. The lessons taught us from the start of this century that we may face major events in the coming years or months. And so it's really important to look at our planning and make sure it's up to date. So with this, I leave the floor to my colleague, who will give you more details on how we can do this together. And thank you again for the SEARO region for being so ahead of the curve and willing really to make sure that all member states are ready for the next big event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvie, and thanks to Dr. Nilesh also once again, because both of you explained how this concept was conceptualized and now how it is growing as an embryo, and to see how the child is going to be born. And with that in mind, we just got to get back to the business. So what is PRET? How is the operational framework of PRET rather set? And what is the essence of multisectoral nature or PRET, and how does the global rollout happen? So I invite one of the colleagues who I consider as one who is from Southeast Asia region after having worked more than 10 years in the region. And she's none other than Dr. Gina Saman, who is the unit manager of pandemic disease preparedness, a global platform of the WHO headquarters. Once again, Gina, may I kindly request you to tell what PRET is all about to the region where you worked for long. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you, Pushpa. Greetings, colleagues from headquarters, and it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for the remarks from Nilesh, Pushpa, and Sylvie. PRET, what is PRET? Well, first of all, the best thing about it is that PRET in French means ready. So that's one of the reasons we thought this was a great acronym. It works for the sake of being ready for the next pandemic. So indeed, having worked in the region, it's my pleasure, my privilege to be back with you here today and appreciating wholeheartedly the time of the IHR focal points to join, knowing their busy schedules. Let me take you through a few slides, starting off with the history of pandemic planning globally. We saw that by the end of 2018, about 92 countries had influenza pandemic plans. And come COVID, by the end of 2020, that number over doubled to 177 countries with preparedness and response plans to COVID. We did a quick survey to say, well, how did those pandemic influenza plans support your COVID-19 response? And as you can see from this lovely quote from Liberia, their flu plan, was the first document that they turned to in their guide to guide their pandemic COVID-19 response. So planning was useful to help them structure and plan for a response. But as Sylvie noted, preparedness is useful. Here's a great story from the African region, where come after the 2009 influenza pandemic, many countries started to establish national influenza centers. And what we see is by the time COVID-19 struck, countries with national influenza centers were significantly faster at establishing SARS-CoV-2 testing capability. This is success. Preparedness works. Another example is in the 2009 pandemic, approximately 10 countries couldn't receive vaccine because of regulatory issues. They worked through PIP framework implementation, strengthening regulatory capacities, where 9 out of 10 could regulate on time the COVID-19 vaccines as a result of their increased preparedness over time. Preparedness works. So what next? Planning works, pandemic preparedness works, we need to keep going. So this new approach, and I'm grateful for Nilesh for raising it, is PRET is based around planning for groups of pathogens based on their mode of transmission. It's a new approach that we are advising countries. It's steeped in the health resolutions, the concepts of One Health, the international health regulations. The initiative, PRET, was launched globally in April 2023, and the Director General of WHO launched the event and had a call to action. So this is available online to indicate the three things, the three activities that we hope countries and partners can do to prepare for the next pandemic. And so we have a modular approach, modular by mode of transmission. And the first module is on respiratory pathogens. Why respiratory? Ongoing pandemic risk, zoonotic influenza, MERS coronavirus, other viruses. You'll see in PRET Module 1 a table that explains potentially all the different pathogens that place us at risk of another respiratory pandemic. The module also provides an organizing framework, triggers and assumptions to help you structure and update your plans. And as mentioned, it aligns with the IHR core capacities, as well as the subsystems for better preparedness and response and resilience in line with HEPR. And it triggers a whole suite of tools and resources to support planning. So what about this organizing framework? And I think it's important to share this because it does help think about what needs to be done when. Underpinning everything that we do is having the foundation of resilient communities, multi-sectoral systems, and of course, the core capacities for emergencies. The next layer of that is having surveillance and risk assessments, ongoing surveillance and risk assessments at the relevant levels. Then you've got the operational stages that align with the periods of an event. So in the interpandemic period, we are consistently preventing and preparing for an event. Come the emergence or the introduction of a new pathogen, that initial event that or the sporadic cases and the clusters, then our aim is to respond and particularly to contain. If transmission continues and we're having the sustained community transmission and with increasing levels of cases, then the response escalates and grows. And once it really is defined as a pandemic, disseminated, that continues to take shape and is constantly adjusted. The response is constantly adjusted according to the context and situation. And then once the situation stabilizes, then we start to transition into a recovery period to stand down some of those emergency systems. And then we return to an interpandemic period where we are preventing and preparing for the next one. So this is important because what we think is necessary is to structure our pandemic plans against these operational stages. What will be done when in the different elements of a response? Critically, we've learned the importance of working multi-sectorally across sectors and recognizing that this will A, save lives, protect livelihoods, and speed up recovery. So our key ask to member states, our key ask to IHR focal points, please update and test your pandemic plans. You are our superheroes, as you can see on the screen, and global targets have been established that by 2031, 80% of member states have up-to-date pandemic plans. Now, the good news is we're seeing that since the launch of the PRET initiative in April, about 1 month later, 54 countries from 5 regions already started that process. And our last count was that by the end of this year, over 100 countries would have started from all 6 regions. This is great news. And hoping that the countries in the Southeast Asia region are part of this group. So our second key ask to you all is to focus on improving both the all-hazard core capacities and the hazard-focused systems. So leveraging what already exists and strengthen those systems that are used day to day. So the architecture, the backbone of all this is the international health regulations and the core capacities within it. And they've been structured against these 5 subsystems, what's called the 5 Cs: emergency coordination, collaborative surveillance, community protection, covering points of entry, for example, public health and social measures, risk communication, community engagement, pandemic management, clinical care, and the access to countermeasures. So, what are some examples of hazard-focused systems for respiratory pathogens? So here's a few slides to give you a flavor of what can be done to strengthen preparedness. One is to look at the surveillance systems you have for respiratory pathogens and taking this mosaic framework developed by WHO to define what you need in your country, what you currently have, and what needs to be strengthened. In terms of genomic surveillance, an increasing area of importance, establish, cost, and sustain genomic surveillance for your priority respiratory pathogens. And there are resources and tools that can assist you in doing this. In terms of the social listening and risk communications, leverage your existing social listening and infodemic management systems for acute respiratory infections. WHO, for example, is now developing a taxonomy for social digital listening for acute respiratory infections. You may choose to adopt this to be able to monitor during seasonal influenza epidemics, during zoonotic influenza epidemics, If you have MERS cases or other respiratory events, then that taxonomy and the monitoring digitally will be very useful to support your response and actions. Another is to sustain the safe provision of oxygen and to prepare those clinical systems for a surge need. So with that, those were some ideas of how to strengthen existing and system needs for respiratory pathogens. And I'll now turn to my colleague Shoshana to help us think about moving forward. Over to you, Shosh.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gina. Next slide, please. So I'll be talking with you about some opportunities to engage in the PRET work. And I'd like to start out by saying that this work is multi-sectoral, as Gina mentioned, and it really requires all of us to be engaged and invested to support national, regional, and global preparedness. With that in mind, WHO and some of our partner organizations have worked together to develop a number of resources that can enable national preparedness efforts. And here on the screen, we've highlighted a couple of those key resources that may be useful for you all. The first one is the PRET Module 1, which Gina mentioned in her presentation. This document provides the why, the what, and the how of pandemic preparedness planning with a focus on respiratory pathogens. It's accompanied by a checklist that helps stakeholders to prioritize what actions are a priority in the national context and how to begin moving forward with some of those different priorities. The third resource that I'd like to highlight is a monitoring and evaluation framework. This document will be coming out later this year, and it is intended to help monitor global progress in pandemic preparedness planning and the availability of national functional capacities, to Dr. Sylvie Briand's point earlier in this webinar. So those are three key overarching resources that are either currently available online or coming shortly. In addition, we have a number of resources that can be used by countries to support further activities in this space. And in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to the simulation exercise package and advocacy tools. The simulation package helps countries to bring together all of the different stakeholders relevant for respiratory pathogen pandemic planning and to understand what are some of the strengths, opportunities, and next steps to strengthen the National Pandemic Preparedness Plan. This simulation package is available already, and if it is of interest to you, please do contact Dr. Pushpa and Dr. Mong to see how you can engage in these simulation exercises. We also have a number of advocacy tools. These include various different social media tiles, a policy brief, etc., that are already online at our PRET initiative website, which has been posted already in the chat. And I'll ask my colleague Tosin to post that link again for your ease of reference. Two resources that will be coming out in the coming months or early 2024 are the Global Implementation Roadmap and the analysis of COVID-19 lessons. The Global Roadmap is intended to provide the vision for how all stakeholders can work together to support this important effort of coordinated multi-sectoral preparedness planning to ensure that we're all walking in the same direction. And that analysis of lessons learned helps us to really identify what worked and what didn't work during the COVID-19 pandemic, identifying some of the strengths as well as the needs that can be improved to support the future pandemic preparedness efforts. With that, I'll ask Gina if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So with those various different resources available or coming shortly, the next question we often get is, wonderful, how can I engage in this work? Well, there are a number of opportunities. First and foremost, we have a series of webinars. We'll have an upcoming webinar in mid-September that you should receive a registration link to shortly that will talk about how partners in particular can engage in the PRET work and how this connects to some of the activities we're seeing at the global, regional, and national levels. Over the coming months, we'll be launching a community of practice that will have a one-stop shop of all tools and resources that can support you in your work, as well as online forums where you can connect with each other and the broader global community to ask questions, discover points of collaboration or commonality. This online platform is also envisioned to support virtual simulation exercises in addition to those in-person workshops that we're seeing many countries engage in already. The online community of practice will be complemented by a high-level PRET network, which will provide an opportunity for colleagues such as yourselves to come together in a safe space to talk about some of the opportunities and questions you may have related to pandemic preparedness planning. We envision that this network gives you a really robust opportunity to engage with colleagues globally, all working on the same focus area and all at various different stages of the pandemic preparedness planning process. As I've already mentioned, and as I see Tosin has put into the chat again, we do have a PRET website where we're continuing to add normative products as well as advocacy materials on a regular basis. So it remains up to date and fresh as you peruse it. I'll highlight just two final opportunities for engagement, and that's our Partners Engagement Forum. We have a mechanism to connect with various different stakeholders engaged in the pandemic preparedness planning space that meets every 2 months. This is really intended to ensure that different types of global, regional, and national partner organizations have an opportunity to hear about the work that others are doing and identify if there is overlap in activities that they can be working together on, and if there's opportunities to work together on identification of gaps that others may have found. And finally, a number of meetings and technical workshops. I know that Dr. Nilesh spoke about the upcoming workshop that will be happening in October in the SEARO region. We are so much looking forward to connecting with our SEARO regional and national colleagues to really kickstart this work in the Southeast Asian region. That regional workshop is anticipated that will be accompanied by a number of national workshops in the coming months as countries are ready to move forward in their pandemic preparedness planning process. Next slide, please. So in a quick final summary, why PRET? PRET is intended to be functional. It learns from our past experiences, the 2009 pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, MERS, SARS, and other events, to build on a foundation of routine systems, ensuring that countries have the capacities already established and the expertise available to rapidly implement pandemic preparedness and response activities. It's risk-based. So instead of developing a multitude of plans that look at each individual pathogen, PRET takes a group approach that says what is common across these different antigens and what is unique that could be included, for example, in the annex of your preparedness plan, so that you end up with one plan that helps you to prepare for a multitude of different types of pathogens, both known and unknown. PRET is efficient. It works on identifying and leveraging systems and capacities that can be used across pathogens to avoid duplication of efforts. We all know that there's not enough time to redo work that has already been done, and PRET helps to streamline the processes. PRET places a large emphasis on collaboration, bringing together partners from across all of the sectors involved, so that we're working together to prepare for the next event. And most importantly, PRET is innovative. It builds on the momentum coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and supports countries to take this novel approach of looking at modes of transmission to conduct pandemic preparedness planning. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much to all of the countries that are involved in this work, all of our partners that are engaging in respiratory pathogen preparedness planning, and all of our colleagues across WHO, but in particular, our SEARO colleagues at the regional and, of course, the national levels. With that, I'll turn it back over to Pushpa.
Thank you very much, Gina and Sushana. indeed for taking us extensively on an excursion through the so-called functional, risk-based, efficient, collaborative, and innovative landscape of PRET. Thank you so much. And you talked about the available resources and tools for us to embark on that journey. With that, I think after these deliberations, it is better to get some perspectives on operationalization of the PRET framework in some of the SEA countries. And that's going to be helpful immensely to the Secretariat, SEARO, and the country officers, as well as for the IHR national focal points from different countries in terms of cross-fertilization of the knowledge. So I see that Dr. Pradeep and Dr. Miru, etc., from India. And India is a vast country with health being a devoted subject. And India is unique, and it's good that a country like India is in SEARO, and that experience and perspectives will be very, very important for us as well as many countries. So the IHR NFP colleagues from India, how do you see or how can PRET be a reality in India at different state levels with the involvement of the center simultaneously? So if you can share your thoughts, I think that will be useful for many of colleagues here, as well as for the global level to learn from your thoughts. Over.
Pushpa, Dr. Pradeep has a hand up.
Yes, Dr. Pradeep, it's really nice to hear from you. Over. I think Dr. Pradeep is muted still.
Yeah, sorry, I am unmuted now.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Pradeep.
Yeah. Thank you for this wonderful platform. And India is also trying to make its own pandemic plan based on the learnings what we are getting from the regional office and the country office. And hopefully we will be able to go through. And I still recall that you also helped us with a lot of documents that will help us to build further. India is very currently, it's a countries of countries with so many states. So it is really unique, and hopefully we will be able to go through. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Does anyone have any question for Dr. Pradeep from other focal points before we move on to another country? Well, I see colleagues from Indonesia as well. Indonesia also is a complex setting, but that complexity is a little bit different from what we see in India. Having taken these complexities into consideration just after the COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia, using the Pandemic Influenza Preparedness Partnership Contribution Funds, did an analysis, and on the basis of that, they started doing IPPPP, Influenza Pandemic Preparedness Planning, at sub-national level, provincial level also, in addition to the central level planning. So how do you see now, when you have done this that exercise very recently, how do you see PRET can further supplement your efforts that you did a few months back? Over to one of the Indonesian colleagues, and also Indonesia also in the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Puspa and other colleagues. I think in Indonesia experience, implementing this PRET to the complex region, complex country as Indonesia is not as easy as we thought, because we are the archipelago country, so this need more effort to make the communication and collaboration among other province and city. And then we believe that our collaboration is not just in the hand of Ministry of Health, but it also depend on how the higher leaders in our country is making the decision to what we call the preparedness for another pathogen, not just COVID-19. And as the result of this PRET meeting, I think we are trying to collaborate all the what we call the source from the all province and then all city in Indonesia by doing supervision regularly, and then to make sure that they have the capability, the capacity to make the response as fast as they can. And then also we have the Public Health Emergency Operation Center that daily we make the report, and then the report we deliver to the ministry, the Minister of Health, and then all the stakeholders have to respond whether the disease or something else is belong to their responsibilities. I think Indonesia, we need more effort, and then it's a very challenging situation because, as you know, that COVID is not public health emergency of international concern anymore, and then we have to face other pathogen, and then we have to respond that as fast as we can. I think that's all from me. Maybe our colleague from Indonesia can add my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tungul, and that's really useful having you have shed light on the difficulties and complexity. Colleagues, in the interest of time, we have selected countries for this discussion because they have unique characteristics. So let me move on to one country. I see Dr. Josephina. There might be other colleagues also from national focal points. Well, Timor-Leste is also unique in the sense that Timor-Leste embraced the concept of national action plans for public health security in the region, and they developed the NAPS, so-called NAPS in abbreviation. And then what they did was, like, using the PIP partnership contribution funds under NAPS as a hazard-specific plan, as contingency plan, they developed a wonderful influenza pandemic preparedness plan, which was used to be as a kind of blueprint for biological hazards. Now, on top of that, PRET concept has come, the first module is aligned with respiratory borne transmission. So would we be able to know how Timor-Leste can take this concept one step further with the introduction of PRET framework? Over to Timor-Leste.
Dr. Pushpa, I think our colleague from Timor-Leste may have left the session.
Okay. Okay, then I see Bangladesh is also another interesting country, and I see Bangladesh delegates, representatives also. Now, Bangladesh recently prepared a pandemic preparedness plan, and that involved multiple pathogens. And that went beyond even respiratory mode of transmission. Now, this was reviewed by our headquarters colleagues as well. How can PRET improve your multiple pandemic pathogen preparedness plan that is being, well, processed, I would say, at the moment? Or to you, Bangladesh colleagues?
For our Bangladesh colleagues, if you please raise your hand, we'll ensure that you have the functions to speak and can unmute.
Okay, I just seem that our Bangladesh colleagues are also not in the audience, but in October, when we have the standalone PRET meeting, secretariat colleagues, we would be able to listen to different experiences of pandemic planning in SEARO countries, the region being a heterogeneous country. So we have 10 minutes left. And up next is in the agenda is a question and answer session. Oh, I see that somebody has, I think it's from Bangladesh. Dr. Nasir Ahmed has raised his hand. If you can allow him to speak, Source.
Can you hear?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, SEARO colleagues. I am Dr. Nasir Ahmed Khan from Bangladesh, and it's really that good that the PRET platform is good for regional level, national level, and global level stakeholders, and you have given us, shared us with the informations and lesson learned from COVID, and also technical informations, which will be very helpful for us. And we have already prepared the national respiratory pathogen pandemic preparedness plan, and also we have national influenza pandemic preparedness plan. So from the information we gathered from you, we'll try to update our knowledge, and we'll do the updated national preparedness plan, and we'll also do the exercise to evaluate the plan. So I think this platform, the PRET platform, is very useful for us, and thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir, for your insights, as knowing that Bangladesh is involved in a very exciting project that encompasses several pathogens related pandemic planning. So I think this PRET overarching framework will definitely be useful for Bangladesh as well. We can further discuss when we meet in October for the big meeting in New Delhi. So we have few minutes left, but let's move on to the last item of this webinar, and that is question and answers. Obviously, you may be having lots of questions and you may need some clarifications from our secretariat who have been working with this concept now for about 6-7 months. So we will open the floor for any questions. You will be able to raise your hands, or else you can drop your messages in to the chat box, and then we will be able to read these questions out. So the floor is yours. You may ask any question from the secretariat or to IHR and FB colleagues.
Pushpa, if you have time and if you allow, can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yes, Dr. Nilesh. Please go ahead.
So, Gina, I wanted to ask a couple of things. One is, you mentioned that the respiratory pathogens, of course, is of utmost importance, considering the next pandemic or big outbreak could be respiratory. But what about other modes of transmission? Is work also progressing? Like you already laid out next few months or up to next year's plan, documents, and technical guidance. So similar progress is happening in other modes of transmission, or it will be taken up later? And are you guys also, I mean, Sylvie's department responsible for that? That is the first question. And second, what exactly concretely countries can do to strengthen or to synergize with the PRET and flu and respiratory pathogen preparedness? I mean, they have been doing, say, pandemic influenza planning since last 10, 15, 20 years. And now with the COVID-19 experience, and I can understand all the experience need to converge and collaborate to have the best optimum preparedness. But I saw she mentioned, Shoshan mentioned checklist and M&E framework, etc. That will be more guidance. But if there is any specific things, thank you. Mom, others are talking. Mute.
Thank you, Dr. Nilesh, for the questions. Two questions there. The first, what does the next few months look like? Two things. We need to stabilize the initiative and its collaborative spaces, especially the PRET network. The launch of this will help us, if you think, colleagues, next pandemic, if it happens in 3 months' time, what do we want to see? We want to see our plans updated, as up to date as they can be, and we want to see a connectivity amongst ourselves so that we can talk freely, quickly, and take actions together. That interconnectivity, that flexibility is what we'd like to build in. So the PRET network is a key priority of ours, in addition to the strengthening of plans. Other modes of transmission, we have in our sightlines that we will do a second module on arboviruses. That is the next module of priority. Now, concrete actions. Wonderful question, and it is something I would actually like to present 2 slides from, because I think I don't see my colleague Isabel on. I would have preferred for her to do this, but this is worthwhile. Let me show the 2 slides. Let's talk about the history of our pandemic planning. As you can see, we had those influenza-specific checklists pre-COVID, and then after COVID, we looked at it more holistically under the initiative of PRET. So we have developed this checklist that Shoshana mentioned to cover the all multi-hazard, the pathogen group, and the pathogen specific. So, for example, including influenza. So what colleagues will see in the checklist are, in the 5 Cs, what you can do for all hazard, pathogen group, and pathogen specific. On the screen now, you can see the actions you can take for pathogen specific for influenza. So I'm just going to pick on one in the circle. If you look at clinical care on the left, to update those influenza clinical management guidelines, SOPs for how you manage confirmed influenza virus infections for people with at risk of severe illness. Another one is if you have influenza, the access to countermeasures. If you have influenza vaccination policies in countries, are they up to date? And how can you leverage them to prepare forward? There's an upcoming policy brief to talk about this, the strengthening of influenza vaccination policies. We know historically that having an influenza vaccination program in a country helps countermeasure response during a pandemic. So that is another piece where influenza is needing to be strengthened, but it has a collateral benefit for other pathogens. A third, in collaborative surveillance, is to actively increase participation in GISRs, expanded GISRs, be it the addition of other pathogens in the system that you use, as well as strengthening the completeness and timeliness of reporting in the system. So I hope that shows a couple of very concrete steps that countries can do and showing the interplay between the core capacities, the foundation, the pathogen group, and the pathogen specific. Back to the floor.
Thank you, Gina. I think we have 3 minutes, but there were 2 questions, interesting questions. These questions are being answered by SOS, so colleagues would be able to have a look at the answer. The first question is, what kind of respiratory pathogen will be the priority for us to detect? So SOS has given the answer. And the second one is also very important one that we will touch upon in the big meeting also. That is the kind of partners that we have for engagement when PRET is being rolled out in countries. I think SOS will give that answer to the question raised by Dr. Tran from India country office. I think with that, we have 2 minutes. May I kindly request Mon, if you have anything to quickly add as far as the summary of this discussion, and then we can wind this up. Over to you, Mon.
Thank you, Dr. Pushpa. Yes, I think our roadmap and the next step is very much clear. We also have this October meeting, and also in parallel as well, we in the IHR NFP network in the regions, we have a IHR knowledge NFP plus knowledge network, and using this platform, we can also share these kind of the updates. And as well as this platform and that Shoshana mentioned about the community of practice in the PRET platform, that we can also align and link together with in our regions to inform our Asia NFP and also related Asia experts in the related Asia feeds in the countries to update it for the informations. So this will be our next step in this coming years, and I hope we can work together to prevent the next pandemic.
Thank you very much. It's very short and sweet. Thanks so much. So with the permission from Dr. Nilesh, let me conclude this webinar. And I think it's my obligation to thank a few people. First and foremost, I need to thank all IHR national focal points for actively participating in this discussion. And then I want to thank our RED, Dr. Salvador and Dr. Nilesh for having discussions with Dr. Sylvie regarding the regional roadmap. So we have been able to map the activities for the next 6 months with the blessings of the management. So we will be implementing, and as Dr. Nilesh said, this is one of the activities. I would like to thank very quickly to Dr. Ruben and his CPI unit. Without the support of Mon, Dr. Ruben and his unit, we would not have been able to successfully conduct this webinar. And this has been planned for about now 3 months. And of course, I would like to thank the PRET Secretariat, Gina, Shos, Chris, and Toshin for your great support. And even your support did come for the NIC meeting. And let me also thank the WHE department, all other units who supported us to make this a reality. And then we cannot forget the supporting staff of the WHE as well as SEARO ICT. I reckon the headquarters ICT team as well. So with that, let me conclude this webinar after once again having thanked everybody. So as PRET Secretariat says, we will not rock. Let's PRET for the next pandemic. Come on, let's PRET. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye for
you.
now. Goodbye.